So I saw the schedule this morning, and I was like, all right, great, I'm following Marcus. Awesome. Really excited about that. So whoever scheduled me 1 at 10 o'clock in the morning, that wasn't a good idea, as they saw, because I was excessively late this morning. And then 2 after Marcus. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that schedule this morning. So hopefully they'll get me mic'd up so I can walk around, because I like to walk around while I'm talking. So as they kind of alluded to there, this is a little bit out of date. It's actually supposed to have a strike through now, but the export didn't work with that. Up until yesterday, I was the CISO of Heroku, the cloud platform as a service at Salesforce. Is anybody familiar with Heroku? I'm just curious, I'd like to see. Like 5 people, awesome, great marketing job. So it's a platform as a service. You write your code, you run it on there. You write your exploits, you run it on there. You write it, it'll run. It's awesome, but it kept my job very busy. So is at Salesforce, but as of 5 p.m. yesterday, my only job now is the founder of a new company called Blue Box. Raise your hand if you know what a Blue Box is. Slightly more people, but I'm starting to feel old now all of a sudden, so I'm not quite to where Marcus was talking about, where predictions and I might die soon, but I'm all of a sudden feeling like that. Excellent. You guys make me feel old today. All right, so why am I up here? Why are you listening to me? Why are you listening to Marcus? Well, just because, right? Me? Who knows? Why am I standing up here? So I want to talk about cloud today and managing security in the cloud, right? It's a big thing. It's a big problem. Nobody really knows how to do it, or some people think they do and they're wrong, and some people think they do and they're right. Who knows? But I know cloud. I know it excessively well. This is what I've been doing. I've been stuck in the cloud. I've had to figure out how to keep people off my platform that is free, that is open, that you can just go sign up. Literally, you can write exploits against it and on the platform because it runs C, Java, everything, right? So you can exploit that cloud. And so I know a little bit about that. I've had the privilege of having multiple CISO roles, and I kind of say that with a question mark, because some days I think it's a punishment. I think I did something in a former life to deserve it. So I feel your pain in the enterprise of going, what is this cloud thing, and what do I do with it, and what do I run there, and what don't I run there, and what is secure and not secure, right? I totally get it. So the great thing about this presentation today is I am one of you again. I don't work for the cloud company. I will answer any damn question you want. Okay, you ask it, I will answer it. I will pull back the covers. I know every cloud provider. Now, I'm not going to betray any of their trust, but I will definitely tell you anything that you want to know today, okay? Because I've been around for a long time. How many, the acronyms that are right there, ASP, OSP, HSP, how many of those are familiar to you? Like 4 people. Okay, ASP, application service provider, OSP, outsourced service provider, HSP, hosted service provider, and then SaaS, and PaaS, you know those, right? I was with a company that launched Expedia.com, that launched Orbitz, that ran American Airlines Travel Online. We were a SaaS provider before the term existed. It was outsourced, or it was application service provider back late 90s. Then all of a sudden that was a bad thing because we had to insource again. And then everybody said, oh, we're going to outsource a bunch of stuff. So OSP, we got a new acronym. Well, then that was bad again. Oh, now we're HSP, we're hosted. Somehow that makes you feel better, I don't know. But genius marketing people kept that company going for years. Now, this is an accepted concept, right? So cloud is well over 10, 15 years old, and people don't realize it. Like, this is a proven business model. It's a proven service model. It's been around forever. My first corporate job, all right, when I got finished doing questionable things for the government, and I went into corporate, my first corporate job was cloud, 1999. 1999, I was in the cloud. It's amazing, right? All of a sudden, cloud is the hype now, right? It's the cool thing. It's where all the cool kids are. I'm like, that's old school. I've been there, done that, right? So I know all these acronyms. And then, of course, the last thing is I have more acronyms than you. So that makes me important, I think, somehow. I don't know. I was talking to a guy on the plane yesterday about this flying out here, which my day started at 4 a.m. yesterday. I'm a little pissy about that. But I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he had every random certification known to man. I mean, I'm just throwing them out there. And he has his resume in front of him, and he's just showing them to me. I was like, holy crap, you have more acronyms than I do. I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm like, you spend a lot of time reading books that maybe are useful and maybe not. Okay, so defining cloud. When I start talking to people about cloud security, which in my former life at Salesforce, I did every day, right? That's what I did. I ran the internal security teams, InfoSec, AppSec, the compliance stuff. But about 25% of my time was speaking to customers or potential customers and telling them why the cloud is safe and everything is happy in the cloud and why you want to come there and why I manage your security. It was great, right? So the biggest problem that I found first was nobody could define cloud. Anybody that knows me knows that for about 4 years before I worked for vendors, I wrote for Information Week and Dark Reading. I can remember about a 6-month period that all of the editors, back and forth, almost on a daily basis, we argued about how to define cloud in our articles because we were trying to be consistent so people could understand it. We never came to that agreement. I think we all ended up defining it differently. And part of the problem is because cloud is such a changing and evolving area, so is the security of cloud. So when you start to talk about just cloud and then you try to talk about the security of cloud, all the terminology, everything is shifting, and depending on who you're speaking to and if they're trying to market to you or they're trying to sell something to you, all of that changes. So first it's important to know before you go into the cloud and figure out managing who you're talking to, where they fit, and what their acronym is. So infrastructure as a service. This is your EC2 Rackspace guys. Who uses infrastructure as a service here? One person, 2 people, 3 people, okay, good. What you're gonna find is I'm going to just keep throwing questions at you, so it's in your best interest to start answering, because I will throw some random stuff at you and I'll start picking on people in a minute. You guys gotta keep me awake this morning. I'm running off like an hour of sleep. So I need the feedback. I need you guys to yell things out. Tell me I'm stupid. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me what you wanna hear about up here. I will change the presentation in the middle and we'll talk about what's important to you guys. Because like I said, I don't work for a cloud provider anymore. I'll tell you anything you wanna know. So then you move into PaaS. So PaaS is platform as a service. This is your engine yards, your Heroku's, your Google app engines. You write the code, you put it on there, they manage the infrastructure because, well, you can't hire a good sysadmin, so hopefully the cloud providers can and they can manage that for you, right? This is a very interesting area and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Then you have SaaS. SaaS is the big one everybody knows. That's the Salesforce.coms, the Workdays, the Box. If there's a company in here that's not using a SaaS provider for their HR and payroll, I'd be really, really surprised. Over the last probably 10 years, give or take, that's become really, really popular. And all of a sudden, security people are going, oh, these SaaS providers, this is not secure. I need to worry about who's putting what on Dropbox. Yeah, screw that. I'm worried about where my social security number isn't getting paid, right? I want somebody to go look at ADP, go look at Workday. Like, these are SaaS providers that have been in your organization for a long time and have the really critical data. And we're worried about Twitter. Yeah. Cool. My tweets aren't that valuable if you've ever read them. And then you have this interesting hybrid. So we talk about hybrid cloud, right? We talk about, oh, we're going to have a hybrid cloud, public and private. What about public and public? How do you audit and manage the security of multiple cloud services combined and you may not control that integration? Let me just tell you, that's a clusterfuck. I can tell you about that one. All right, so as we start to look at these different types and we talk about them, we have different areas of risk and they stack, right? Your infrastructure guys, what are you worried about? You're worried about your physical level, right? Somebody stealing the computer, which I haven't seen that kind of threat happen in a very long time. I would love to, because I miss the days where you had a report of this big piece of equipment that required a crane got stolen out of a CO. And you're like, how? How did that happen? Awesome, like you shouldn't do that, but awesome, like you really want to know about this, right? Some of the old school guys know some of these things that I'm talking about, right? Then you have personnel, right? You have the data center techs, the guys running your fiber, the guys moving the equipment around, you know, what did he do with the drive? I worked with this provider, they're up in Birmingham, Alabama. And I grew up in Florida, Pensacola, Florida, and Atlanta, right? So I can't pick on that area too much because yeah, my family's rednecks, so I can't get away from it. But I talked to this provider up there, and they're in the financial services business, and they were doing some work for a company I used to work for, and we just got to kind of, you know, shooting the breeze one day, and I said, yeah, what's your data destruction like? You know, what do you guys do with these hard drives? And they go, let me show you. And I go, okay. And I'm thinking they got like some cool grinder in the back. They take me out back with a shotgun. I'm getting a little nervous about this point, you know. We just had lunch, a couple beers, you know, I'm a little nervous. Rednecks, beers, and shotguns. I mean, it sounds like a good Friday night, but, you know, I don't know. And they would shoot hard drives, and I'm like, Cool. All right. It's a fun place, Birmingham. Awesome. But you have your personnel. You know, what if somebody didn't shoot that hard drive? What if they took that hard drive with them and went somewhere, right? And then you have the internal ops and the infosec stuff that, you know, every organization does. Then you move one level higher in the stack, right? Take that and add PaaS. So the Herokus, the Engine Yards, the Google App Engines, whoever else is out there, right? They're all irrelevant. Salesforce will dominate all. They're the new evil empire. I'm just playing. I love Salesforce. These guys, you have to worry about all the infrastructure stuff, but now you have to worry about that platform, right? They're running the OS for you. They're running the database for you. They're patching that stuff. They're doing your HTTP load balancing, your SSL termination. This is their really sweet space, right? They know how to scale. They know how to recover. They really know how to defend that layer. Well, now you got to get into all the vulnerability management stuff, all the patching stuff. You got to deal with all that, and you have to, you know, trust them with that. Yeah, I can say that I completely agree with what Marcus was saying, that if you trust the guys at your vulnerability scanning company to say, yeah, this is critical, then that's just silliness and you shouldn't do that. But can you trust the guys at your PaaS provider that they're not trusting the guys at the scanning vendor and that they're really applying it, right? So now you got to start looking at those things and dig into those things. Okay, great, that's more paperwork to deal with, right? Then you go one level higher and you start to talk SaaS, right? And so SaaS is just the application. It's great, I have to do nothing. I don't have to deploy code. I don't have to run an infrastructure. Oh, but wait, I have to rely 100% on that SaaS provider now. So now I got to go up another level. I got to go to the web application level, right? I got to go, oh great, there's this whole OWASP top 10 thing to deal with, right? And oh, well, is the OWASP top 10 really complete enough? What happened to the 3 that dropped off in the last 4 years, you know? Or what about these other things that haven't quite made it yet because they're emerging? Or, you know, what if just somebody deploys bad code and it crashes? Like, now you have a whole nother level to deal with. So as you're talking to SaaS vendors, or excuse me, as you're talking to cloud vendors, see, I can't even keep the terminology straight, and I know this stuff. Well, I think I know it. So as you're talking to these guys, you have to look at the areas of risk. More often than not, I would get security questionnaires while I was at Heroku, which is PaaS, but the questionnaires were defined for SaaS. They were like, oh, what are you going to do about web application security? Not a damn thing. It's your application. You wrote the code. What are you going to do about it? And they're like, whoa, 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 why are you putting that back on us? I'm like, no, you wrote the code. Sure, I'll fix it. Whatever. Yeah, I'll charge you. I have no problem with that. Whatever. I like making money. It's cool, right? But of course, that's not going to work because I don't know their application. That's not our core business. But yet they were trying to push that risk upon me. And so the problem that we see is that we have to start to think differently. Right? As we work with cloud providers, we have to think differently. Now, what's interesting is, to me, it's not really thinking differently, but as an industry, we have to. So I come from a world where cloud was 1999. Right? That's the world that I come from. I remember the days of we were all on mainframes, and then we went distributed, and then we started to go back and then forth and back and forth. I've done this like 5 times in my career now. Oh, outsource is good, distribute is good. No. Centralization, consolidation, good. Okay, chargebacks to the business unit, right? Chargebacks to customers, all this kind of stuff. I've gone through all of this, and I've watched it, and I just sit back and go, yeah, I know what happens in 2 years. Cool, no worries. Like, I already have the strategy. Let me go get it from, 2003. Oh, that's going to expire. Let me go get the new one from 2006. Yeah, no problem, right? So to me, it's not really thinking differently, but it's, as an industry, we have to control the business people. We have to control the new fragmentation that we're seeing. It's the same principles, the same basic concepts we've gone through for years. We just have to reapply that to the new terminology, which is good, because that means that we can make new updates to our documentation that makes it look like we're doing something, because we throw the new hot buzzwords in there and we get raises and we put that on our resumes, and that's great, right? So we should do these things every few years just to screw with the business managers, right? Because it's good to do, right? Why not? So anyway, first thing is knowing that all cloud providers, just like any vendor on the planet, they're not the same. Right? There's nothing that irritated me more in my career than getting those security checklists that are like 300 questions and they have absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about. There's no relevance. They were written for a back-end data processing system at a bank. And it's like, are you using RAC? No, I'm not. Why would I do that on this Windows box or this Linux box? Sure, whatever. Are you doing all these things that have nothing to do with it? Interesting thing is, I worked with a big retailer the other day. And I wish I could say who they are, because they're doing amazingly innovative things, and you can see this in their store now. They're replacing their point-of-sale systems with handhelds, just like if you go to the Apple Store, and this is a big clothing retailer, and they're putting a lot of this processing, on the cloud services. And so they send me over their questionnaire, and I gave them credit because it was at least tailored to something cloud. It was SaaS, right? And so I get this SaaS questionnaire, and I go, well, it's better than the last one that I got from a bank that had nothing to do with anything that's relevant here, but it still doesn't work. So, I answered the questionnaire as thoroughly as possible, right? I said basically, look, here's the answers to these things aren't applicable, here's why, or here's, how we meet the intent of what you're asking for here, even though this question is not really relevant, right? Like, I try to do the right thing, and I try to help them through this process. And they literally write me back, and they're like, this is unacceptable that you don't do all these things, right? And again, it was back to, oh, okay, for the application that we're going to use on your platform, do you encrypt the data? Well, no, you wrote the application, encrypt it, do whatever you want with it. Do you do, OWASP, or do you do secure coding practices and meet the OWASP top 10 and all this? No, it's your application, you wrote it, like, whatever, right? And so even though I thought these guys were gonna be a little bit more forward and a little more progressive, deep inside their organization, they still hadn't quite got it, right? There was some security guy who knew this stuff, but there was a risk management team who was just kind of following this checklist and going down the box. Please don't be that guy, ever. Like, don't be that guy. Like, that's an annoying guy to deal with all day long. Like, seriously, like, when I was at Heroku, which, by the way, I don't know if you guys see it, rocking the Heroku t-shirt today. I was gonna wear the staff one to be uber cool, but it was a little wrinkly, and I didn't have time to iron this morning because I was late, so I didn't get to do that. But, the most annoying thing was getting those questionnaires. So, the biggest problem that if you're not a vendor with those questionnaires is that those questionnaires aren't really helping you, because they're not answering the relevant questions. They're making you feel good, right? Because I say, yes, I do this, or yes, I do that, but you're asking the wrong questions, right? So when you take those questions, you apply them to anything in cloud, or even different kinds of vendors, they're irrelevant. They're a waste of everybody's time because they're not fitting what is relevant to the organization. So we'll go into that a little bit more as we start talking about rationalizing your risk, right? So we heard a little bit this morning already about like understanding the risk to your business. Understanding the risk is the key thing, right? You have to know all of your risk. I hate to say risk management. With a passion, I hate saying this. I hate saying risk-based and all this. For the last umpteen number of years, we have just beat the hell out of all the risk management and compliance people and said, that's not real security. There's nothing technical about it. I can't write code against that, right? We have beat the hell out of these people. All of a sudden, the last, I don't know, about 2 years or so, as an industry, we're going, hey, everything needs to be risk-based. Yeah, risk management, that's a good thing. And it's like, oh, crap. We have to eat our words on that one, right? I am 100% guilty of it. 100% guilty of it. I used to look at security as code, right? I started my career writing exploits, reverse engineering code. This is what I started doing for the government back in the mid-90s or so, right? And so to me, if I wasn't breaking into a box, I wasn't doing security. All of a sudden, I've grown up, and my younger self would punch me now. But I've grown up and realized, oh, it's all about the risk, right? You can't solve everything. We don't have the big budgets that some of the other departments have. We don't have unlimited resources. We have to manage the risk appropriately. And so to manage those risks, we must understand what the risks are, and we must rationalize what a true risk is. So this is my favorite example right here. No matter whether it was the company that did travel processing and data processing for the airlines, TRX, where I started back in '99, whether it was some of our SaaS offerings at Disney, which I bet you didn't even know, Disney has SaaS offerings, right? Some of our SaaS offerings at TiVo, or even when I was at Heroku and Salesforce, I always get questions that were just not really in line with the risk that that was relevant for what we were doing. So PCI is my favorite one. Everybody uses PCI as a measuring stick now. So myself, I had just had this conversation with the director of security at Engine Yard, the VP of security over at Box, the CSO at Workday. We all met for lunch the other day, and we asked about this. And everyone said, yeah, every one of our customers comes and says, are you PCI compliant? And we go, well, yeah, I mean, portions of our platform are, but how is that relevant? We don't handle credit card numbers. And they're like, well, we require PCI compliance. Why? Well, because that's what we require. Why? Because it's in our policy. Why? I don't know. Like, you ask why about 5 times, and the answer is always, I don't know. So everybody uses PCI as a measuring stick. I'm not here to beat on PCI. Actually, I am a little bit, because I hate the damn thing. No, let me be honest for a second. PCI is a good concept. It's a good intent. It gives us a rallying cry. Unfortunately, it is not the end-all, be-all. I was doing PCI compliance before PCI existed. I don't know. Does anybody in here remember the programs that all the card brands had prior to PCI? Holy shit, like 2 people. I'm feeling old. This is like, you guys are bringing me down today. This is not cool. I'm like, I had to fly all the way from the West Coast out here. I'm like not sleeping, and all of a sudden, like, I'm feeling really old. I'm gonna go have a little cry after this. So before PCI existed, each of the major card brands had their own PCI-like program. All right, and then all of the merchants and providers basically started to revolt because they said, look, we can't manage 5 different programs because they weren't the same. MasterCard and Visa, they were cool because they would take each other, so that was awesome. Amex, they're just dicks. They were a pain. JCB, who cared about them? But for some reason, they're like, oh, we're really big. I'm like, no, you're not, go away. Even Discover tried to get in. Everybody just kind of ignored them too. It's cute. It's cute. They're like, we're Discover. Like, okay, great, good for you. Visa and MasterCard were really the ones that drove the thing. PCI now is most closely related to Visa's program, right? And so Visa's program kind of was the one that everything kind of rolled up into, right? When I was with TRX back in, from about 99 to about 2006, 2007, Amex, Discover, MasterCard, and Visa were all direct customers. I had to do every one of these. When PCI came out, I cheered. I was like, this is awesome. There's one checklist, not 5 now. But at the same time, I think that PCI sucks, and it's, it's not security, it's financial liability. How can you roll it down from the bank to the credit card company, from the credit card company to the merchant, from the merchant down to the processor to, oh crap, he just got screwed, right? So it's not security, but everybody comes in and says, oh, you gotta be PCI compliant. But it's not relevant. I can achieve PCI compliance on a subset of my infrastructure because it's a scoped assessment, it's a scoped requirement. And I can tell you all day long I'm PCI compliant. And if you take that and check that off and say, okay, great, they're PCI compliant, everything in PCI they have and they're doing for us, that's an invalid assumption. Therefore, your entire risk model for this cloud service is wrong. And you've just put all of your data at risk. Go to jail, do not pass go, no $200, whatever the monopoly thing is, right? So you have to rationalize the risk as you walk through these things. This is the biggest problem that I see right now in cloud security is people don't understand what the true risks are. And like I said, the 19-year-old self would punch the 31-year-old self squarely in the nuts because I'm saying the word risk, and I should never say that. It should be all about buffer overflow, RAR. No, can't do that anymore. Wrong crowd for that. That's a DEF CON talk. Okay, trying a couple of new things out here. All right, and so, because it is the customer's responsibility to rationalize the risk, they have to also take the responsibility of the security, right? Cloud is interesting. The business people are like, hey, push it all to the cloud. What's Microsoft's commercial? To the cloud? Something like that? I love that. The business people are like, yeah, take it all over there. Put all the IT over there. Put all the, the problems, the scaling problems, the backups, the security, whatever, all the crap that we don't want to pay for because we're not in IT. We're not in technology. We're not a technology company, right? Which is a bunch of crap. Every company is a technology company, with the exception of my uncle's oil company. Wow, they just suck. Yeah, they're so far behind. They're like up in Jackson, Mississippi. With nothing wrong with Jackson, Mississippi. That's where famous from, right? But yeah, they got like one computer in the office. A bunch of good old boys walking around going, that box over there. It's very interesting to me. But every other company on the planet, except for that one, I think, is a technology company at this point, right? And being a technology company, you have to take ownership of your risk. You have to take responsibility for something. You can't push everything off. You have a liability somewhere. So a lot of people go to these cloud providers and they say, oh, well, you're going to handle my security. Cool. I'm not going to put it on you now. It's your responsibility. No, that's not true. It's your data. You own the data, right? At the end of the day, if something goes upside down, you're the one who's going to be held liable. You may say, oh, well, I have a contract in place and I have insurance and all this. Great. Yeah, that didn't keep the data from being stolen. And good luck. What's litigation going to take, 8-9 years? I came from TiVo. That's a company of eternal litigation. That company only makes money on patent lawsuits at this point. I know what that process looks like. It's an 8 or 9 year process to get anything back, right? the company's out of business at that point if you sustained, a large enough loss that was material to your organization. So you have to understand your risk and then take the responsibility, but at the same time, accept that there's some transfer of some of those responsibilities and of some of that risk, right? You can't be, a control freak in the cloud and say, I want to know everything that's going on. I want to see everything. Well, you're paying the cloud provider to do certain things and to be an expert in certain areas. Same time, you have some responsibility, so you have to walk that fine line and figure out what makes the most sense where you're not annoying the cloud provider, you're not eating up your time on things that don't make sense for you to do, but yet you still find that line of where you can manage your risk and probably manage the responsibilities between the two organizations. That was always a fun conversation for me with people, especially people that had really, really good security teams and that were very progressive. They just wanted to crawl up my butt all day long and want to know everything. Vulnerability came out in some random technology that they assumed that we use. They were all over us. Did you get this patch? When are you going to patch this? What's going on? How is this? How many systems do you have? And I'm like, whoa, calm down, calm down. I'm like, we're good. We'll have this conversation, but you can't do this 14 times a day. Like, I can't handle that. Like, it doesn't work. Get off a bug track. You should unsubscribe now. Like, too high volume for you, apparently, right? But you have to find that fine line. And while you're finding that fine line, you have to adapt, you have to improve, you have to innovate. You have to figure out what works in the cloud that doesn't work inside your enterprise. What processes translate that don't translate, or what processes do translate and which processes don't translate, so that you're not up the cloud provider's butt all day long, so that you're not spending time on things that don't make sense and that are a bad ROI to you. Again, my 19-year-old self would just sucker punch me for saying ROI. But let's be honest, this is a business. Security is a business. Security is a critical part of many businesses. Some companies don't think so or realize it, but other companies do, right? So you have to kind of figure out what makes sense and where do you improve and how do we evolve as an industry. It's like checklist auditing. That's so 1997. We shouldn't do that anymore, right? We should figure out, what are the real risks? What protections are there? How do we apply these protections? And where do we go from there? But the first way that we can do that is to know thyself, okay? So we have to really understand what do we care about? What are the big risks when we go to the cloud? So let me ask you, let me throw this out to the crowd here, because I'm gonna try to wake you guys up some more this morning, because I need you guys to keep me awake, is what are some of the risks that you have with the cloud right now? Shout something out, don't be shy. Really?
All right, cloud risks, how do you go about going for like assessment? I want you guys to pretest, something that I wrote and I'm supposed to go out. But you may do that because mine, I
Sure, okay, so assessments in the cloud. What else? Anybody else have any risks?
Cloud-specific controls, like so EC2 security groups, IAM, all that good fun stuff.
Yeah, IAM. That's funny. We'll talk about that. Okay, anybody else on the third one?
I'd say like operations, processes, general access control of the boxes, things of that nature.
Okay, all right, very cool. So what we've basically done is we've taken everything that we would look at in the enterprise and we've said, okay, how does this go in the cloud, right? But the fact that 3 people in the room could actually answer what they were curious about is really good. So the rest of you either have no idea or just too shy or lazy to talk about it, right? I don't know which one. I'm going to assume that you're shy, okay? We're going to go with that. It's cute, okay? So, but the first thing you have to know is, what is that baseline? What are the things that you care about? So do you care about assessments? Do you care about the cloud-specific stuff and that based on the provider you're in? Do you care about the access controls? You have to know these things. And we're going to talk about those a little bit as we go. I'll work those in as we flow through here, okay? But you have to define that baseline of, these are the things I care about because these are my critical assets. These are the minimum things that I need my providers to have in place. Just like I would say, this is the minimum security that I need within my organization. Maybe that's PCI. Maybe the intent of PCI is your minimum baseline standard. You could do worse. You could do better, but you could do worse, right? So you have to do the same thing for your cloud. And then you have to understand the types of services. So, EC2, right? That's a very specific question to EC2. IAM is a service that EC2 provides. But if you're in rack space on slice host, they don't have the same thing. So you have to, it's very interesting. You can go, okay, what are the risks between these things? But that's a protection. So what protections are available to me, right? And once you understand that, you can kind of flow through and say, okay, here's my baseline. Here's the type of risk or PaaS or SaaS or whatever. And then you can say, okay, what are the controls? What is available to us, right? And then you can start to work together together with your provider, hopefully, it sounds like you've had some problems with that, we'll talk about that, and you can figure out, okay, where do I transfer some of the stuff, what, who can do what, and where can we share? And that's where we get into like the dating period with the cloud. Outside of working for a cloud provider, this is the biggest thing that I hear is the biggest problem with cloud providers. It's the biggest thing I hear from the industry is people say, cloud providers don't want to talk to me. They don't want to work with me. They don't want to show me their controls. They want it to just be a black box and it's magical. I can tell you firsthand that that's changing. I can tell you that Salesforce's approach has been fairly progressive over the years. Not that it's been hugely progressive, but fairly progressive. I can tell you that some of the other cloud providers, big name cloud providers, they're also changing this. They're starting to work with people more and more. But if down at bullet point 3, I'll skip ahead there, don't expect everything for $8 a month. If you're paying $8 a month for a service, or you're using a free service, and I'm the cloud provider, and you want me to go through a 4-hour security assessment, I'm gonna say piss off. $8 is not worth my time. Right? I made more money walking to the Coke machine than I did sitting in that assessment, right? So for $8 a month, you're not gonna get a lot of effort out of me because it's not worth my time, right? It's a bad ROI for me. I'm gonna point you to my controls documentation. I'm gonna point you to my security site, trust.whatever, or /security or whatever, that says, hey, here's the warm and fuzzies, but I'm not gonna go through a whole lot because it's $8. $8. I can go panhandle in downtown San Francisco and make more than $8 an hour. I'm just saying, and if you have a service that's free or $8 a month and the critical assets you're putting in there are $2 billion, $1 million, $500,000, and I'm not willing to talk to you for it, maybe you shouldn't use that cloud provider, right? So sometimes it's okay to walk away from those cloud providers, especially the $8 a month ones where your assets are worth $2 billion. It doesn't make a lot of sense there for me, right? But most of your providers, they will talk to you. They'll tailor assessments to you these days. So, great point there. Vulnerability assessments, pen testing. I've heard that before. I've heard cloud providers say, oh, the load's too much, you can't do this. That's a bullshit answer. It's bullshit, right? Vulnerability scanning, Marcus will tell you, right, has been refined over the years. It generally does, I'm not gonna say it doesn't, because sometimes it does, but it generally does not crash full networks now, right? Something that is grossly misconfigured or that is 90% capacity, sure, those get crashed. So if it's too much load for your provider, that means the provider can't scale. It means it's a bad provider. Go somewhere else. Don't deal with them. Don't try to, deal with that, because they're gonna, the first time some kid is like, I'm gonna run a vuln scan against these guys, or a mild denial of service attack, they're gonna come down crash. Hell, if you get a spike in the application that you're hosting with them, right, because you just had some big PR, drop, and you've scaled, and you're at 10 million customers all of a sudden, they're gonna crash. It's just bad business to use them if they say that, right? Most providers now will let you run assessments against their infrastructure. If you're using somebody that's on EC2, that's on Amazon, right? Amazon has that rule about you're not allowed to run vulnerability assessments and all that. That is a crap rule too, that's not true. Your cloud provider can actually file a form with Amazon that says, hey, we want to do pen testing and vulnerability assessments against our account, anything inside of our account. So like Heroku at Salesforce, we have that filed against all of our EC2 accounts. We are allowed to run vulnerability assessments anytime we want. Now Amazon doesn't let us do it on their smallest base image, and because that's a resource sharing thing, but that's not an image you use for production anyway, that's personal use development image, right? So anybody that's in the cloud, even if they're in EC2 and they say, no, we can't do vulnerability assessments, there's a problem, right? But, so you should be talking to those guys. And when you get talking to those guys, you ask them the questions like, hey, IAM and all of that, what can you do in the cloud? And they'll start, and they should be able to tell you those questions. Those are legitimate questions. But you tailor them as access control, because they may use IAM and they may not within inside of Amazon. They may have something different. So you tailor that to that cloud provider, and you understand the intent, not the implementation, because implementation is not the key. The key is the intent, that there is access control, that it's well managed. The actual piece of technology doesn't matter. If you use a Palo Alto firewall or use a checkpoint, irrelevant. What is relevant is it doing the right thing, right? And so you want to know that those protections are in place. Aha, you like that one? I heard somebody laugh. All right. Yeah, this was very questionable the other day. Salesforce saw this presentation because I was still there, and they knew I wasn't talking, and the PR people said, you can't say condom. I'm like, but encryption is a data condom. That's what it is. It makes it safe. It's good. You don't get the STDs and stuff. And they go, you can't say that. And I go, guess what? I'm not going to be working for you Saturday. Cool. All right. So guess what? Encryption is a data condom. All right. So when you talk to your providers, talk to them about their protections and Figure out if they're meeting those intents that you're trying to get, right? But you're going to own some of that. You're going to have to make sure that some of those controls are in place. So in some of your PaaS, your infrastructure, even some of your SaaS guys, if your data is super critical and super valuable, encrypt it. If you encrypt it, guess how many things that you don't have to worry about? It's about 90-something% of your list. If you encrypt the data and you're the only one who can decrypt it and they don't have access to do it, great. So many security problems solved right there. Well, solved. Depends on your definition, right? It's like the WAF versus fix your code argument, right? I believe in good security all around, but I will use things like data encryption to buy me some safety, right? Especially when I'm riding on somebody else's infrastructure. And then audit. A lot of the cloud providers are starting, just now really, starting to extend logs out. This is kind of a trend that I'm seeing. They're slow to do it because it's a lot of data, and they're figuring out how to make this scale, how do we get the logs to the people, you know, all this kind of stuff. But a lot of them are starting to allow you to backhaul logs out of the cloud providers and infrastructure so that you can actually see what's going on. So run that through your SIEM, run that through your big data, do whatever you want to do with it, correlate it, aggregate it, alert on it, however, whatever you think is the right methodology. This is going to give you that insight. You're going to be able to see if one of your admins changed the security settings, so now your Salesforce instance doesn't require SSL, or, oh crap, you know, new users got added. Who is, I just owned you at, you know, whatever your company is, right? These are things that all of a sudden you're going to be able to catch that people have historically said, oh, you can't catch those things in the cloud. Use the APIs. There's APIs for most major cloud providers now. With APIs, you can do continuous auditing. Anybody who has ever heard me speak or that's ever read anything that I've talked about in the last 2 years, I'm huge on continuous auditing. Not manual auditing, because that sucks, and I would stab myself in the eyes if I had to do that all day, every day, but automate. Marcus said something that hit like a nerve with me. I hate most IT organizations because they don't automate their jobs. One of my friends made fun of me years ago because I had automated my security operations work down to about 30 minutes a day. I knew what was on my network. I knew what the anomalies looked like. I knew what the threats at the time looked like, right? Networks were simpler back then, right? But all my security operations work was about 30 minutes a day spread out throughout the day because I had Perl. Perl is the most awesome thing on the planet. Also the most horrible thing on the planet because it will let you screw yourself. But it is awesome, right? So automate your auditing of these cloud services. Hit their APIs. Pool the list of users. Do a delta. Alert on the delta. Like, you're going to know what happens. Same thing with the logs. Look for your anomalies. Do all that stuff. And then as you're working through this and you're finding problems, or you believe you're finding problems, communicate your intent to the provider, not the implementation. So if you're going into EC2, if you're going into Rackspace, if you're going into Workforce, Workday, any of these things, talk to them about what your intent is and work with them to see if they're meeting the intent, not the implementation. As networks evolve, as services evolve, as applications evolve, there's many different ways to do everything. So saying that you have to use this exact standard, right? So I had somebody come to me the other day and said, you have to use SHA-256. We use bcrypt. No, you have to use SHA-256. Bcrypt better. No, you have to use SHA-256. Great, whatever, go away, right? I'm not gonna, you know, that's not an argument to have, right? We met the intent, we actually exceeded the intent, but because some checklist said I had to use one thing over the other one, they wanted to ding us and be like, you're not secure. You missed one thing. Okay, great, go somewhere else, whatever. I don't care, right? It's not worth my time today. So make sure that you're communicating and you're working with them. And then where to look. So this is where we're getting into talking about the risk, right? And I'll be around all day, so anybody who wants to really dig in on this, let's do a breakout and we'll talk about it. But where to look. Biggest things in the cloud providers, where's your data and is it commingled? Most cloud providers are getting away from commingling data, but not always. So some of your cloud providers, your core data, you'll have your own database for the data that you're uploading, your business data, but there may be some application configuration data that may contain application variables that are loaded at runtime that may have passwords to databases and things like that. Those may be in some shared databases. So if those are compromised, if that database is compromised, right, which is an internal database, which is generally less, restrictive than say the customer database, then now they didn't really need to compromise your application or your database. They just have access to compromise everybody's stuff. So you got to kind of watch the data commingling where everything is stored, right? And then you need to look at the assessments. Who does assessments? How frequently? And what is the scope? The biggest thing that I always thought was funny when I was getting these assessment questions was like, do you do assessments? Yes. Okay, great. Or, there we go, do you do assessments? Yes. How frequently? Quarterly, monthly, weekly, depends on what the actual piece of component is, all this. Okay, great. Nobody ever asked about the remediation. And nobody ever asked about the scope. Scope and remediation, very important things, right? So make sure you ask those kind of things. So you have to trust. There's some trust here, and that's where I go back to about 2 slides ago where I said don't be a control freak. You have to trust. Anytime that you're using an outsourced provider or you're working with somebody, there's a level of trust that you have to have. It's just what it is, right? When I drive down the street every day, I have to trust that some other driver is not drunk and is going to run into me. All right, so I'm putting my life into everybody else's hands as I'm on the street. Cloud is much the same way. You have to put a little trust. Backstop that with assessments and with contractual obligations, right? Get them to state that in their contracts or in their security documentation, right? And then you have at least some backstop, but you're going to have to trust them at some point. So it's just unfortunate. Encryption. Can you encrypt things? Are they encrypting them for you? Who has access to the keys? Is everybody's data encrypted or salted the same, or is it individual? All the password breaches have really brought this one to the forefront lately, right? But the service providers that allow you to do your own encryption and plug into your key management, these are awesome because you now can control this in quite a few cloud providers, and you can make sure things are secure. Now, the interesting thing is I always hear people say, I want all my data in the cloud encrypted. Okay, what are you willing to give up? I go, well, I'm not going to give up anything. You go, okay, well, automated reporting, calculations, like data mining, like all this stuff, if it's encrypted and there's no way to decrypt it, for those automated processes, those APIs, you kind of have a problem. So you have to be very careful with this one and figure out what are you going to give up or what are you going to encrypt and not encrypt and all that kind of stuff. Where I see many of the cloud providers going, though, is to be able to support this end-to-end. Salesforce bought an encryption company last year just so that they could do this kind of thing, and they can fully support it. There's a couple other ones, Box and a couple guys, they're all working on these things as well. So that'll be good. And the last big thing to look at is the architecture. What I think is very interesting is a lot of people will come into like a PaaS provider and they'll say, okay, what if there's a SQL injection in your management application? Great question, and we'll answer that. And then they kind of just walk away from there. But the real thing is, how does it impact you? So if I have a management application, or even if I'm SaaS, right, and there's multiple instances of an application running for different companies, if a SQL injection vulnerability happens in one instance, does it affect a customer running in another instance? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the architecture on the back end, right? It depends on the restrictions. It depends on how applications are authenticating instance versus instance, all these things. Architecture reviews are your biggest friend in understanding your risk and your threats. So back to the question of how do you know if data is commingled? Architecture review is a really good way to start. You can actually do the runaround on them by saying, oh, let's do an architecture review. Let's just talk about this so that we understand it. We want to make sure that we're working with you properly, right? So you're playing nice. And then you look at it and you go, there's one big massive database server. And then you just hit them with the commingle question. They go, right? And now you've just done the runaround and you've caught them on that without being too aggressive or putting them on the defense or worrying about they're going to lie to you and all that. Though I believe that most vendors have your best intent in mind. Now, whether they truly meet that or not, who knows, right? But to kind of wrap up on working with the vendors, and we'll take some questions real quick. Just make sure that you understand the difference between the types of vendors, that you're accountable for risk as well as they are, and that you help the vendors, help them learn from you. Communicate with the vendors and tell them what you want. Find that security guy inside there and make friends with him. Right? And tell him and say, hey, this is the kind of features I want. I will say right now, the best customers at Salesforce were the ones who would build the relationship with the security teams. And so we had two. We had mine and the Salesforce.com security team. The best customers were the ones who would reach out to us, would make friends with us, and tell us what they want. And we would then get that injected back into the product roadmaps, because security had a lot of say there. At some vendors it does, and some vendors it doesn't. But make friends with those guys, and things are going to work out really, really well for you. So I have about 10 minutes, give or take. So I want to answer some questions for you guys. So if there's any specific topics, whether it's related to the content that was right here, or just diving in and saying, okay, where do we look, or where are some other areas? Let's go through that. Questions?
What degree of detail do you provide in your assessment reports to your clients?
It's a good question. It's a really good question. That's a tough one. That's one I've always struggled with. I believe in open kimono, give everybody as much information as possible, but at the same time, I believe in privacy. And so I have to be very careful about assessment reports. If we do an internal assessment and we run across a lot of instances, and there's potential that some customer applications or data may have been exposed, then I can't. So I have to be very careful about what I can expose and give them. If it is an assessment where we took that in mind up front, I will give them pretty much the full assessment. I may redact a few things, a few details, like if there was a particular account that was compromised or revealed. I'll redact that because there's no need to know the exact account name, but I will communicate that, yes, our pen testers were able to get root on this box, through a weak password of an account or whatever it might be. But my personal policy has always been, give as much information as I can. Most vendors will just give you kind of the executive summary saying, this is the scope, we found 10 criticals, we're fixing those in 3 months, and that's it. But that's starting to change a little bit. The other thing that you have, though, is if they won't give you a lot of detail, ask them if you can run your own assessments. So whether you're just running a vulnerability assessment high level or web app assessment high level, or you're getting a third party to come in, you can usually gain a little bit more information like that. And security teams love that because it's less work that they have to do at these cloud providers. Like, great, you're going to run an assessment, give us the report. Awesome, I saved money today. So there's 2 ways to work into that. Other questions?
Is there an equivalent to the Angie's List for cloud providers?
An equivalent to Angie's List for cloud providers. Wow, Angie's List. And my mother can barely use a computer, and she doesn't know what the internet is, really. She's still confused by that. She still thinks that Google is the internet, because that's our homepage. And she told me about Angie's List before anybody else, and I was like, holy crap, my mom knows something on the internet before I do. Not yet. There's 3 organizations I can think of. 2 are yet to launch, and 1 I think has started to launch, and I'll get that name in a bit and give it to you. They are starting to put together information about different cloud providers and allowing people to review them and give feedback. You also have the CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance. It's a voluntary program where the cloud providers can sign up and say, these are our controls, feel warm and fuzzy. But there's another organization, and I need to get the exact name to make sure I'm not mixing 2, but they are trying to do this kind of feedback of all kinds of security vendors, including cloud, so that you get the same net effect. Next.
Application or architectural reviews. Just how open is it? It seems to me that one of the things I would be interested in is your control of security that you have in the network that also be used from one of your clients that you sign up to detail,
Right, so it's very interesting, right? So that's one of the mindset changes that I talk about, right? For years, we in enterprise were very comfortable because our networks were all internal, and so we would guard those secrets, okay? We would say, oh, we can't tell anybody how our network is set up, our IP ranges, whatever. Cloud providers are a little bit different because their infrastructure is pretty much exposed. If you look at something like Heroku, I can hide it from you, or you can just go run code on my platform and map it out, right? It's just, motivate people are going to figure it out. So it still kind of goes cloud provider by provider, but many of them, if you're a customer or you're in the sales cycle and you sign the NDA, they will open up. Now, if you're free, you're signed up for $8 a month off a website, something like that, they're not going to because it's not worth the time of the conversation, unfortunately. But if you're actually a serious customer, most of them will open up to you and will show you what's going on there. Because the fact is that the guy who was signed up in the sales process, signing the NDA and is going to give you money, is not a huge risk. You're not generally worried about those customers knowing too much because there's low probability that they're going to attack you. It's like the old misquoted stat that says, oh, most of your security threats come from insiders. No, most of your security breaches aren't from insiders. The biggest ones are, but most of them, the breaches don't happen because of insiders. Same thing with customers. Most of the time, customers aren't the ones who are going to attack you. Okay, so I have 5 minutes, and she told me she has a shut the fuck up sign. I'm going to push it. I'm calling her on it. I called her on Twitter on it this morning. I don't think it exists. So we're going to see. So I'm going 6 minutes. All right, so I need more questions to fill up at least 6 minutes here.
What is Blue Box?
What is a blue box?
No, what does Blue Box do?
Blue Box is the new hottest security company on the planet, duh. Fucking awesome, my God, don't you know yet? Press release drops on Tuesday. New security company co-founded by myself and Caleb Sima. Caleb Sima was the founder of Spot Dynamics. If you guys are familiar with WebInspect, the web application vulnerability scanner, that was his, he wrote it. I tell him it's crappy code, it was actually kind of good. But we founded a new company. We're kind of in the stealth mode right now because we're about to enter kind of a crowded space, so we're very careful what we say. But it's very difficult to say what you can't say. But we're enterprise security solution for a problem that all organizations have right now and that everybody is trying to solve. And with the talent that we've recruited, we think we can solve it. Does anybody know who RFP is, Rainforest Puppy? God, I'm feeling even older. Oh, you do? Oh, a couple people actually know. Okay, so basically we've gone back to the old school and we've hired like the best security researchers we can find, the best developers we can find, the best enterprise security people, and we're just putting an awesome team together. So look for the drop on Tuesday, and then about a month from now, we'll reveal 100% what it is. But if you look at the landing page, you'll be able to figure it out a little bit. Any other questions other than my propaganda? Right.
Speaking of CSA, the concentrated awareness, now they have their home matrix. What's your opinion of that? And is there anything similar?
I love when people ask my opinion. Awesome. CSA is good in intent, like PCI. It's actually better in intent than PCI. CSA is a good start. It's still early. Really early stage on it, but it's a good baseline to start. It was really focused on kind of SaaS at the beginning, and then infrastructure is kind of put in there. PaaS is still kind of a very confusing space, so it still doesn't really address and answer all of kind of spaces and the nuances of those, but it's a really great start. I actually recommend people using that. To me, really, that is probably the best place, and all of the standards and documentations that we've ever had, because they're all the same, right? It's still the same intent and type of controls, just different, right? Just implemented a slightly different way or by a different company. So if you go and you look at any of the outsourced provider guidelines, you look at the CSA stuff, it covers it all. There's nothing that's hugely new there and innovative. Any other questions? Go ahead. You?
Have you ever received a question, say, from maybe like an insurance provider that says, have you adopted and implemented ISO 27002? Yes? No?
Yes, and I laugh because ISO sucks in the U.S. Like, it's not relevant in the U.S. very much. Yeah, no, I get those from insurance providers. I get them from customers, and I would generally answer those as, yeah, our security policies and control structures and everything are modeled after the ISO standards, but we were never ISO certified. And the reason, it's a business decision whether you get ISO certified or not. It's not a security decision. And the decision for me has always been that in the US, ISO has never held a lot of weight. Internationally it has, but in the US, it's never held a lot of weight. It's never been a blocker to business. And being able to say that I'm ISO certified has never got me better security because I can do it all without being certified. And it's never got me a lot of new business. I agree with ISO and I love it. And I've got that question many times, and in my, just most recent, I would answer it as no, and then put a narrative with the intent. And I've always been fine. I've had cyber liability insurance. I know this is a new concept. I've had that since like 2000 or 2001 at almost every company I've ever worked for, and never had a problem not being ISO with that. Okay, so one more question, we'll wrap it up. That's it? You guys are all good? You know security in the cloud? Right.
How big do you have to be for the platform to sit down and have these
It's not how big you have to be, it's just how big you have to look. That's it. No, if you're a paying customer, most of the companies will talk to you. It's just to what extent. I did an article a few years ago, so I can talk about this, where I wrote about cloud security before I was on the other side of it, of the modern day cloud. And I quoted the CEO of Joyent. And the CEO of Joyent said, if you're paying me $50 a month, it's not worth my time. If you're paying me $1,000 a month, I'll talk to you and I'll give you anything you want. If you're paying me $1 million a month, you can run the organization. Like, you can define whatever you want, right? And that's the good stuff. Oh shit, she does have a shut the fuck up sign. All right, so that is my time. So if anybody wants to talk further, catch me afterwards and we'll talk. Thanks.